Hello, gorgeous ones. Hope you're all okay. Today I'm going to talk about anger and how appropriate it is to express or feel our anger. I'm going to start by asking you what you might be upset about. What's got you by the tail and shaking you out of your usual happy state? There might be a long list of things that are bugging you. I can fully relate if that's the case. I've recently made the conscious, active choice not to dwell too much on the things in my life that make me angry because if I let them get the better of me, I would be an absolute basket case right now. There is so much happening in my personal life that is beeping me off, that is outside of my control. I have to focus instead on the one thing I can control, and that's my reactions to it. And since I'm not in a position as yet to resolve a lot of what's got me by the tail and shaking me, I have to do the run and hide, fake it till you make it thing and pretend it's not happening. It's all I can do to avoid going completely crazy. Believe me, you would be astounded if you knew how many plates I'm juggling right now and how big an effort it is not to get angry and start foaming at the mouth about the things I don't have the power to change. And I know I'm not alone in that. I talk to a lot of women who feel the same way. But I have a secret weapon. I have a drum kit. I learned rock and roll drumming about 40 years ago, and sometimes a good pounding is the only thing that works to get rid of the anger, the frustration, and the sense of powerlessness that sometimes goes along with that. That and some extremely heavy rock music blaring away in the background to keep me on point as I drum. And my other half knows that if he hears that music and the drums all working together, it's better not to turn up and ask me for anything, anything at all. The best thing he can do under those circumstances is hand me a very large glass of wine and then run for cover until the music stops and the two-headed horned monster that has replaced his normally sunny, happy wife has crawled back under the rock it came out from. But seriously, I want to talk about anger today because it's a normal human emotion that is often completely justifiable, but seldom seen in a positive way. And there's too much negative narrative about it, especially when it's women feeling angry or showing their anger. Anger is a very misunderstood emotion, and that is a really big shame because understanding it and channeling it are really good things to do with the energy that it creates. So let's get rid of the notion right now that we're not entitled to be angry or to express it. Of course we are, we're human. Well, okay, we're actually superhuman as well functioning wise women in the world, but you get what I'm trying to say here, right? And yes, it's better to take to the drums or pound the pavement with our trainers or hoist the punching bag in the garage and pull on the boxing gloves, or to even just go and stand in a field and scream, than it is to start screaming at people who may or may not deserve it, because the last thing we need is to feel guilty about being angry, especially when it is justified. Because beating ourselves up as a consequence of being an angry woman is really no route to feeling better, is it? Anger is, for most women, inextricably bound up with guilt. Another emotion that takes us nowhere good. They wonder why so many of us are angry and frustrated, right? But how do you deal with your anger? And a really important question to ask yourself, is it justifiable anger? If it is, then fair enough. But what if it's not? What if it's an overreaction to something that's been said or done or not said or done because you're already stressed and wound up about things? You know, sometimes the small things can be magnified and it's easy to blow them up out of all proportion when we're already stressed and wound up. But before you go any further towards contemplating your anger and deciding whether it's legitimate or an overreaction, just indulge me a little bit while I talk about the box theory because you might find it helpful. The box theory, it's a theory for managing stress and that the problems we all have in life fall into either one of only two boxes. One of those boxes has a lid on it, the other one doesn't. The box with the lid on it is the one you put the stressors into, the problems that won't get any better with your input. No amount of interference from you will improve things. They will only be resolved with time. and therefore there's no point in you worrying about them. So those are the things you put into the box and you put the lid on it. Let them deal with themselves in their own time. But the box without the lid is the one where we put all of the problems and the stressors that won't go away with time, the ones that will only be resolved if we get our sleeves rolled up and do something about them. We can't put a lid on that box and hope they'll go away, because they won't. We have to act to get them resolved. So it's a question of deciding what goes in which box. And once we know what is causing us stress and deal with it appropriately, as in, putting it into the right box, we can hopefully lower our stress levels to the point where we can stop the things that shouldn't make us angry or upset, and normally wouldn't, from pushing us over the edge. Maybe you're already good at doing this. If you are, that's great, and you don't have to suffer my meanderings if you're bored with being told what you already know. I won't mind at all if you bail at this point. But you might still be interested in reading one of my books, because one of the things I do in my novels is portray real emotions in the stories. Some of the heroines in a few of my books, especially in the Teapot Cottage series, are dealing with situations that cause them a great deal of upset and anguish, and they either internalize them because they don't want to be negatively judged for expressing legitimate anger, or they blow and start shouting at the wrong people and bend everyone, including themselves, out of shape, and then go on to beat themselves to a pulp over their ill-judged outbursts. Sometimes they find in the aftermath that they shouldn't have been angry at all about something, and wouldn't have been if everything else in their lives wasn't such a mess. Most of my heroines' lives are in a mess, to be honest, when they arrive at Teapot Cottage, at least to start with. Their terrible traumas and their reactions to them are all resolved in one way or another over time, but they're usually hormonal basket cases, for want of a better term, when we first meet them, or they're struggling with the aftermath of some other kind of personal trauma that has left their life in ruins. Either way, they have the right to be angry. But it's hard to win, isn't it, with an emotion like anger? It unnerves people and nobody's comfortable with it. But if we know why we're upset and we look at it objectively in that count to 10 opportunity we're always wise to take before unleashing our fury, we can decide whether it's justified or not. If it is, we shouldn't feel guilty about it at all. If it's appropriate to be angry, there's nothing to feel guilty about, as long as it's expressed in ways that don't involve hurting people. It's always a good idea to leave the knife in the drawer or the car at the curb, but telling someone that you're upset and why in as rational a way as you can manage, that's not something you should feel guilty about for yourself, and you certainly can't allow anyone else to make you feel that way. Why should anyone else have that kind of power over your legitimate emotions? If in that count to 10 moment you discover that the anger isn't justified, you can pull back from it, and then there's nothing to feel guilty about. In reality, the only time you have any reason to feel guilty about being angry is if it isn't justified and you go ahead and express it. And as a highly intelligent, well-functioning, wise woman in the world, you can use that count to 10 moment to pull yourself back from that. Anger is energy. Harnessing it appropriately in ways that galvanize us to act in positive ways is the best way we can use it. Channeling that energy is the best way of managing it. One of my friends was so angry at her wife that she removed herself from the house before she could say any of the things she wanted to say that might have ruined the relationship. She barged off in a huff on a 4-day city break to Copenhagen. It was a place that she'd always wanted to see, and she'd got to be a tourist, realise a dream, and come back in a saner frame of mind. Meantime, the wife who had caused all the upset also had some time to reflect on her own, and when they eventually got back in front of one another, they were able to talk things through. My friend used her anger to do something positive for herself, something life-affirming, because she was wise enough to know it was a better alternative to staying and fighting and potentially compromising her marriage. Now, I know not everybody can do something that grand, I grant you, but it's just an example of how using the energy anger created to do something positive and meaningful instead of something destructive had a positive effect. So whether it's painting a wall your other half has been driving you mad by not doing, or taking up a new sport as a way of managing your stress and improving your own fitness, you can decide for yourself what you do. You're the expert on you. And where anger is justified, and don't let anyone tell you it isn't when it is, it's all a matter of how you deal with it. And if it's out of proportion to whatever has caused it, it's time to take a look at the reasons why. As a behavioural scientist, I've always been more interested in what drives behaviour than I've ever been in the behaviour itself, because that's the key to understanding people and the key to understanding the self. Understanding myself and where my reactions come from has taken me decades, and it's still a work in progress, but it really is the key to figuring out how to deal with emotions that have the ability to do great damage if they're not managed well. Anger is a normal human emotion, but it stops being normal when it's constant or out of proportion. As the true, wonderful expert on yourself, you can figure out what's got you in a state. You are brave enough and clever enough to examine it. And if you're feeling guilty about your anger, you can be brave enough to work out what you need to do about that too. The basic truth is that stress hormones created by anger and guilt are harmful to both body and brain in high doses. All of us, myself included, need to understand what we're angry about and what we can do about it and how to stop it from dictating how we live our lives. Modern life, God, it brings more challenges than we've ever faced before. And sometimes the load gets heavy. I get that. I feel that. Sometimes we feel that we're more or less managing, and then something happens to derail us or at least make us wobble. And that can cause fear or resentment or bewilderment or a sense of powerlessness or anxiety. And all of those emotions can lead very quickly to anger. And it can be pretty hard to stop it from taking over. But taking control of anger, rather than letting it control you, dispenses with the need to feel upset or guilty about feeling it. Now, I'm going to say that again. Taking control of what's making you angry, rather than letting it drive your behavior, gets rid of the need to feel upset or guilty about the fact that you feel it, a normal human emotion. It's not what happens to us, it's how we deal with it that counts. And just because you're amazing on every level that matters, you can deal with it very well. You have to just choose to, in whatever positive way works for you. Okay, I will talk to you soon.